Aloha and welcome to the Kukui Connection. I'm Marilyn Lee, and this is a weekly show where we talk about legislative issues, community issues, and issues of culture and the arts. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the environment, and I'm very excited to have someone who's an expert on the Albizia tree with me today. And her name is Alanna Miyashiro. Welcome, Alanna.
Hi, Marilyn. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I heard you speak at the Mililani Neighborhood Board, and I was quite impressed with your knowledge about the Albizia tree, which has become one of the worst invasive species in Hawaii. Let me read a little bit from your bio because it's kind of impressive. Alanna Miyashiro is a Community Outreach and Education Associate for the Ko'olau Mountains Watershed Partnership. Her kuleana involves coordinating community-based Albizia outreach, including workshops, presentations, and volunteer opportunities. She believes in community engagement and empowerment and preservation of Hawaii's treasured natural and cultural resources. She graduated from the University of Hawaii at Manoa with a BS in Natural Resources and Environmental Management, and has been working in conservation for the past 3 years. She started her love for native plants when she was in high school, and she was an ambassador for the Waipahu Academy of Natural Resources and Future Farmers of America. So that's really impressive. I'm very impressed, and I'm impressed these days. Sometimes when I hear you speak at the neighborhood board or on PBS, I see young people speaking about the environment, about the interest that young people today have in the environment. I think more than in the past. Do you notice that, or do you think that's true, or why would it be true?
Definitely. I think, especially with this digital age, we have access to so much information, and we're just so much more aware of all of the, not only environmental issues, but all of the different issues around the world. And I think younger generations, because we have so much access to this information, it makes us feel more involved in community issues, in global issues. We feel more connected globally, so we kind of take the responsibility in making this a better world for ourselves, because we've seen how in the past hundreds of years, the focus has kind of been a little bit lost. So trying to refocus for the future.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very impressive too. So tell us, what is the Albizia tree?
So the Albizia tree, the scientific name is Falcateria falcata. It's in the bean family, interesting enough, and it is a non-native tree here in Hawaii, native to places like Papua New Guinea and the Falkata Islands, which is after its namesake. And it grows in these dry savanna plains and can grow very, very tall, up to 100 feet, very quickly as well. And it was introduced here in Hawaii in the early 1900s by foresters, after a lot of the watersheds had been stripped due to intensive agriculture from things like cattle, pineapple, sugarcane. What they had realized was a lot of the aquifers were sort of becoming drained of its resources. And it wasn't until then that they finally made the connection that our water resources were connected to our forests. Mm-hmm. And once they made that connection, they had realized that they needed to replant and reforest these entire mountainsides that had been stripped in order to ensure that Oahu had drinking water. And so these foresters had chosen plants that could grow quickly and spread quickly because they wanted to do this really, really fast. And unfortunately, a lot of native species here were evolved to grow very slowly. And so they chose a bunch of different trees, including things like ironwood, and a lot of other invasive trees that we know today. And one of them was albizia. And they had planted over 100,000 trees in the early 1900s.
Wow, that's amazing. That was in territorial times then.
Yes.
Yeah. And since then, has it spread to all the islands of the chain?
Yeah, so the majority of the albizia infestations are on the Big Island as well as on Oahu, because those were kind of where their first outplantings were. There is albizia found on all of the major Hawaiian islands, but luckily enough, those populations are not as bad as on Hawaii Island and here.
Mm-hmm. So you'd find them just about any place on the island of Oahu.
Yes, I feel like it's prime habitat for albizia. Well, surprisingly enough, actually, most of the albizia infestations are found only on the Ko'olau Mountains. So we see like the northern and eastern parts of Oahu. There's only one fairly large infestation on the Waianae Mountains, just because it kind of was originally planted in the Ko'olaus and spread throughout. But we actually see today that the albizia is moving towards the Waianae Mountains. So they actually recently got funding last year to start controlling albizia within the Waianaes, because if that's left untouched, it's eventually going to spread throughout the entirety of the island.
Well, it's spread to Mililani and to Wahiawa.
Yes.
And I'm sure to Pearl City.
Mm-hmm,
So,
Pearl City.
I mean, it does spread very rapidly then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some people think it's really a beautiful tree.
I think I would agree with them. I think albizia is a gorgeous tree, and a lot of the times what we find with invasive species is that, you know, if you're looking at the species itself, it's a beautiful plant, it's a beautiful
Mm-hmm.
animal, but it's just that it doesn't belong here. And it kind of takes the checks and balances out of the natural environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have so many other invasive species these days, but albizia seems to be one that a lot of people are very concerned about. So what is your organization doing? I know you're doing education and you are doing things like coming on the Olelo and talking to me about it. But in terms of getting rid of the albizia, what can you do?
Yeah, so we do different levels of management within the Ko'olau Mountains Watershed Partnership. So for these upper Mauka, upper watershed areas, we have a wonderful field crew that goes up and literally treats tree by tree. And they've been successful in clearing entire valleys of albizia, which is really amazing. For more lower elevation, more urban areas, that's where the outreach team comes in. And our number one goal is to just spread the word, you know, because I think a lot of people aren't even aware of albizia or aren't aware of how invasive it is. So teaching people, number one, how to identify them as seedlings and how to identify them as large trees, and also how to identify which trees are hazardous to communities is super important. Because the thing about albizia is that it has these really shallow roots, and because it grows so tall so quickly, its structure is very weak and brittle, making it susceptible to falling over or for branches to break super easily, especially in high wind, high storm events. So if you can imagine you have a 50-foot tree and it's growing over your home, anytime you have some sort of like hurricane warning or anything like that, it can be really scary. And these kinds of trees, when they're upwards to 3 to 4 years old, can cost $5 to $10 to even $15,000 to remove one tree.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty unaffordable for any average homeowner here in Hawaii. I've heard a lot of stories of people who come to our events and tell us that they had no idea that this was an issue, and so they had let their tree grow in their yard for decades. And they finally found out about albizia and realized that they have 1, 2, 3 trees in their yard. And
little seedlings all over the yard, right?
Little seedlings as well. And they have no way of even removing these.
Wow. That's really scary. Yeah? Well, I do know that when some of the albizia trees on the H2 were cut down a few years ago, that the people there were, we really loved the trees, but I don't think they had any idea of the concern. What about wildfires? Do they contribute to the risk?
Actually, surprisingly enough, they don't really dry out very much. They hold on to a lot of water. So what we saw in the recent Mililani Mauka fire was that a lot of those hillsides are covered in albizia, and we had these fires that kind of ran through the area and burned everything, but a lot of the albizia trees didn't die from the fires.
How sad.
I know. And I think it's because, especially for the larger trees too, they're so big and they're so kind of thick that they're a little bit resilient to fires. The unfortunate thing is, though, that albizia love to sprout in open areas. And so now you have an entire open mountainside that has just been burned, and then a live albizia tree that can still seed, and you're most likely going to get an entire hillside of albizia if it wasn't that already. Yeah.
That's really kind of scary.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. When you mentioned treatment, what would treatment consist of?
So we have different options for treatment that, are accessible to anyone who wants to treat any sort of non-hazard tree. One of the ways we do it is ring barking, where you essentially cut a ring around the entire tree and you strip the bark all the way around to the soil level. And what you're kind of doing is cutting off the inner and outer cambium layers so that the tree cannot send up water and nutrients to its leaves. This method sort of leads to a full mortality, and the great thing about this is that it's super accessible. All you need is some sort of handsaw or a knife that you can cut into the tree, and you don't need any herbicide, which I know a lot of people can feel uncomfortable using herbicide. For other areas where you kind of want a faster mortality, or people who are comfortable using a little bit of herbicide, we have another method, and that's called incision point application, or IPA. Essentially with IPA, you would take any sort of hatchet and cut notches all along the tree. And a little squirt bottle full of herbicide. We like to use Milestone, and we recommend using Milestone. And you do very tiny drops. We say about 0.1 milliliters or so.
Like a little eyedropper.
Yeah. You don't need a lot, so don't feel like you're kind of dousing the entire tree in herbicide. But you'll just do a little drop in each notch, and that leads to full mortality of the tree as well.
Really?
With the IPA method, you can see, depending on the size of the tree, full mortality within 3 to 6 months. But if you do the ring barking method, it'll take, as long as a year to a year and a half.
Now, this information is available on the website for the Ko'olau Mountain group.
Yes, so you can find all of that information on our website. It's going to be ko'olauwatershed.org/albizia. So,
okay, how long has it existed? Your group.
Oh,
your
okay.
Organization, yeah.
Yeah, our organization was founded in 1999.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
So somewhat recent, but not really that recent.
Yeah, I guess this will be our 25th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Time goes by when you're having fun, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, how is it funded?
We have multiple sources of funding.
Mm-hmm.
So our organization itself is housed under the Research Corporation of the University of Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we are a research project under UH, and we receive different grants and funding through the state, through federal, and also different local organizations as well. Yeah.
You know, you are a fountain of knowledge about Albizia.
You know, the funny thing is, Marilyn, I never would have expected myself to be so knowledgeable in Albizia. I would have never thought this would have been my shtick, but it just kind of turned out that way. Before I started working for KMWP, I was actually working for the Army Natural Resources Program.
Uh-huh.
And that conservation organization mainly works in the Waianae mountain ranges.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I was doing conservation full time, I was never actually working with Albizia trees at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I moved to KMWP when I really realized the gravity of the Albizia populations here. And it just goes to show, like, you know, you can live in one area or one community on the island and have completely different issues, completely different environments than, you know, a community on the other side of the island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very interesting thought. Yeah, it really is. So, what haven't I asked you that you would like to relay to the public about Albizia and what people can do and some of the bad effects of it?
Yeah, I think that what I think about the most when I think about the work that we do with Albizia is thinking about what had happened in Puna on the Big Island after Hurricane Iselle.
And that was when?
That was in 2011, I believe.
2011, okay.
Yeah. Puna has a large population of Albizia. And after Hurricane Iselle, hundreds, if not thousands, of trees had fallen over and blocked off the roads, fell on power lines. A lot of people were out of power for 3 weeks or more. And so not only is this like an environmental issue, but it's also like a human health issue, you know?
Sure.
Not only are we trying to protect our beautiful natural resources, but we're trying to protect our families, our communities, our neighbors. So I like to think about that because not everyone is personally invested in conservation. That's understandable. But I think it's safe to say that everyone is invested in, their homes, their families, their livelihoods. And that's what we really need to think about when it comes to not only Albizia, but invasive species as a whole. If you think about coconut rhinoceros beetle and how our lives would change if Hawaii never had coconut trees or our beautiful native palms, or, little fire ant, and how our lives would change if every time you went outside underneath a tree, these fire ants fell on you.
Bite you,
yeah.
Well, not only that, they can come into the house.
And so we really need to reframe how we think about these things because all of it is interconnected, and it's really a holistic issue that not only affects the mountains, which a lot of people don't interact with on a daily basis, but everything and every day. Yeah. And I think that just for what people can do to help in this issue is just, like I said, learn how to identify it. And if you see it in neighborhoods, be a good neighbor and take care of the trees that you have. Let your neighbors know if they have trees. Just spread the word and be involved within your community, because restoration and conservation, it can't just be done by organizations like mine. It has to be done as a community, when it comes to schools and education, legislation, and everything like that. It all comes together
comes together.
Yeah, do the work that we do.
Do you go to schools sometimes and talk about the albizia tree?
We do go to schools occasionally, but I would love to do more work, because I think it's super important. And I really didn't learn about invasive species until I was in high school. I didn't understand that concept of like a good plant versus a bad plant, but
Yes.
Once we start to remove that, what we call like plant blindness or green blindness, and you don't just see like a mass of plants, but you actually see them as individuals for what they are, it can be really beautiful and really eye-opening for sure.
Well, I really like your point of view, and you're really sort of inspiring in the sense of your ideas about how the community can help. And of course, as neighborhood board people, we're all about the community, and community input is really, really important. And that's why when you came to the Mililani board, I was so excited after I heard you that I wanted to have you come on Olelo and talk to the people around the island. And you're very good.
Well, you make it easy to just relax and talk.
Well, you should. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's like a conversation, and it's something I enjoy doing. And I really am very much into the whole conservation thing. I have a huge garden. I have several gardens actually, and I'm all into ulu trees. I love ulu, and that's something that is not a native, but it's a very good tree to have.
Yeah, I love ulu.
It's for sustainable food. It's wonderful, and so I want to thank you so much, Alanna, for coming on to the Kukui Connection today. And for those of you who watched today, you can see Alanna by tuning to Channel 54 on the first Friday of the month, and this will start in April. And then on each following Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on Channel 54, and listen to her talk again. And she departs so much information that I know you will be happy to watch, and tell your friends about it, because it's something for the future of the island and the future of the state. So aloha, and thank you for listening, and aloha, and thank you so much for appearing. I really appreciate it. You did great.
Thank you again, Marilyn, for having me. It is an honor to be on the legacy of a show, Kukui Connections.
After 20-something years.
I can't wait, Keep it going.
Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha.